Sangeet, let's look at all of the great opportunities that Rafeda speaks about. Why do you believe that most platform organizations fail? What are some of the common pitfalls that you've identified? And what can organizations do to avoid those kinds of failures?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question because there's a lot of talk about how everybody wants to become the next platform, but you often see that the graveyard of failed platforms is much more highly populated than the few companies that have really been successful at unlocking massive value. Once you are successful, there are fewer limits to scale and value creation as a platform. But getting to that success, there are quite a few reasons or quite a few factors that come prior to that. One of the key things that we see platform businesses fail with is understanding the importance of balancing three very conflicting criteria or three very conflicting goals. You need to scale, but you also need commitment from the ecosystem. Scale is how big your ecosystem is. Commitment is how committed they are to you versus alternatives. And you need to profitably manage that ecosystem. You need to monetize in some way without reducing scale or commitment. And there are many examples that show why this is important. I mean, think of Uber entering ride-hailing, entering markets. It scales very rapidly, but there's no commitment. You have the same driver working across 3 different ride-hailing services, and that's why they continue to burn money 10 years after starting, and it ends up becoming a game of last man standing, who has more money to burn. It never reaches that profitable, sustainable model. So ensuring that you get to that scale versus commitment, this has especially been exposed this year with the cost of capital increasing. You saw during the pandemic, everybody wanted to put money into edtech platforms and not really accounting for the fact that once we went back to normal, people would stop consuming education entirely online. And now you suddenly see that those companies invested heavily in scale without any commitment. All of that demand elastically fell off. So managing this trade-off is critical, and platform companies actually have very different organizational units for managing scale versus managing commitment versus managing monetization, just because they're so much at odds with each other. The second thing I want to just call out over here, and this builds off an example that Rafida just mentioned, Facebook launched Libra, and one of the reasons they failed was that there was a fundamental conflict of interest between an open standard like Libra and Facebook's ownership of a community like WhatsApp. People were concerned that while they promote the open standard Libra could push a WhatsApp wallet globally and make that the default wallet while the open standard and the currency was being pushed out there. And that was one of the main concerns when you have traditional companies move in this direction. You need to be clear about what's your business currently, and is that a conflict of interest with the new business that you're getting into? If you're a bank, is there a conflict of interest if you get into the housing search business? Or if you're a CPG company, is there a conflict of interest if you get into e-commerce? So understanding if there's a conflict of interest between your traditional business and the platform business is critical. Amazon is a great example of how that conflict of interest constantly frustrates merchants because Amazon keeps competing with them on the platform. And the final point, I'll just reiterate this. Platform businesses fail either because they are too open or because they are not open enough. There are very few who are able to open just about right to get external participation while also managing risks successfully. So these are my 3 key reasons why platform businesses fail today. And if you're going down this path, you need to really look out for these 3 things as you move forward.
I mean, what's fascinating to me is that collaboration seems to be the most important factor here. And while startups have the capacity to be nimble, it feels like the incumbents, the big banks, have the real advantage if they've built strong partnerships and credibility with banks. Like, I have my home loan with a bank. I don't have it with a startup. There's a level of trust. But I suppose trust is the key, and all of this can only happen when there is this kind of trust around them. Isn't that so, Kent? It's Standard Bank has built up a level of trust with its customers for decades, and that gives it the right to be at the center of the ecosystem and to build that platform ecosystem with your partners.
Agreed, Toby. And I think, if people ask the legitimacy or financial services firms playing in the space. It's around that trust that we've managed to get. And being a 160-year-old or 60-year young organization, we've got lots of trust with lots of partners and lots of consumers. So building a successful platform business is difficult. We've heard from Sangeet, it's rather the exception rather than the rule. So one of the key challenges in building a platform business is how do you build the communities on all sides of the platform? The so-called chicken and egg dilemma. And there's several strategies to address this, but all of them require an environment where parties feel safe and secure. Hence, the platform needs to build trust among all participants and between the participants and the platform itself. From our experience in the space, there are three key areas to focus on when building and then retaining trust, because you need to keep that trust as long as the platform continues to operate. So first of all, you need to think about how do you create an appropriate governance structure and managing any potential conflict of interest that may arise. Next, you need to think about how do you create an environment to facilitate the interactions and make sure that people trust that environment. Finally, how do you signal commitment to partners who are going to need to invest in this platform and support the innovation on the platform. So let's go into these in a little bit more detail on each of them. Platform firms need to establish fair governance. It needs to be seen as fair to all parties within the ecosystem. And they need to do this especially when they're managing their relationships with their partners. Clearly convey the rules of engagement, how people should behave on the platform, and then continue to educate your partners on that governance and the right type of behaviors that you want to see from them when they operate within the ecosystem. They must also ensure that they avoid conflicts of interest. Sangeet's given a couple of examples previously, and this is specifically important when the platform owner also acts as a provider on the platform. Other participants in that platform might think they might be disadvantaged if the platform owner all of a sudden starts changing some of the rules of the game for operating. To allay these fears of interest, to allay these fears of conflict of interest, the platform owner should at least give a commitment to the partners and other players on the platform that they won't compete with them for at least a minimum period of time. Platforms create value through enabling interactions and need to create an environment where both consumers and producers feel safe and confident that they can transact. There are several different mechanisms to do this, including the creation of a reputation system. We've seen that with Uber, we've seen it with Airbnb, and it's a very powerful tool to do that. Next, they need to create clear identity management and access controls to the platform. And finally, they'll look at also moderating that ecosystem participation. Some platforms even go a little bit further and provide insurance cover or extra protection to participants on the platform. Next, platforms that require partners like developers to come into your environment and commit resources to open innovation on the platform. You need to build something called innovation trust. Platforms can help build this innovation trust by, first of all, signaling their commitment to the long-term investment within that specific platform. Next, they could also think about setting up an application development fund, aim at rewarding developers who build apps on the platform. And finally, you could even think about inviting partners to participate in the upside and benefits that are generated from the platform. For me, I think it's key, and the bottom line is that you need to properly curate and govern a platform to build trust and ensure its long-term viability.
Indeed, trust is the center of all of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the underlying foundation that makes sure that people feel comfortable that there's a predictable environment in which they can operate.